Welcome to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Daniel from Mount Angel PD. He has 38 years in law enforcement, but with his cadet years and his reserve years, he has a total of 44 years in
That's
this
true.
profession. So I'm really looking forward to having Chief Daniel as our guest today. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Paige. I appreciate it very much.
Your background is extensive. 44 years is a really long time. I know you started as a cadet when you were 15 years old. Can you give us a little bit of background into the entirety of your career?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't remember another time in my life where I didn't want to be a police officer. So I jumped at the opportunity when I had the opportunity to become a cadet with the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office in the Portland metro area. I did that when I was 15. My mom actually drove me to meetings and drove me to the sheriff's office and until I was 16 and got a driver's license. But I was there as a cadet, learned to do all kinds of really cool things, got to do some great stuff with deputies there. Learned the basics of my career really. And the day after I turned 21, I was walking around the inside of the sheriff's office in the halls there, and the sheriff popped out of the office, and we knew each other pretty well. And he said, "Hey, didn't you just turn 21?" I said, "Yeah." And so he said, "Get your rear end into my office and raise your right hand." And so he swore me in as a reserve deputy. 363 days later, I was a Salem police officer and was headed off to the academy after some basic training. Was a police officer with Salem for about a year and a half and had the opportunity to become a canine handler. Thought that was going to be the coolest thing ever. And so I was selected as one of the first three canine handlers for the city of Salem. I went to dog school down the Los Angeles area, Riverside and Los Angeles area in early 1990. Uh, I was a dog handler for quite a while. I was a cadet advisor. I got promoted to sergeant in 1998. In fact, that day I retired my police dog and became a sergeant and went on patrol as a patrol supervisor. Then, about a year later, I decided I'd like to try a stint in schools. And so I went and supervised the school resource officers. They call them youth officers with Salem PD. And so I went and did that for a little bit more than a year. Learned an awful lot, supervising 11 SROs and two DARE officers. Then I rotated back to patrol, had a great patrol squad for the remainder of my time there. I went back to school because I really wanted to promote to lieutenant. And I started working on my bachelor's degree. While I was there in school, I was encouraged to reach out and just kind of be all I could be. So I started applying around because I wasn't being successful in my promotion opportunities at Salem PD. So I became a lieutenant with the Port of Portland Police. So I made a move after 16 years with Salem and went to the port, which was at Portland International Airport. And wow, the things I got to do while I was at the Port Police. Post 9/11, they sent me all over the country to become a terrorism, counterterrorism, and explosives expert and trainer. I have been to more weapons of mass destruction training than I could ever imagine. I've been to the nuclear test site in Nevada. I've been to the hot facility in Alabama 3 different times. So done a lot of really cool things there at the airport after 9/11. Supervised, I would say, probably 80% of the department while I was at the Port Police. Went back to school again because I thought, I'd like to be a captain or a chief someday. And so started a master's program. Started looking around for opportunities because I didn't have a captain's opportunity at the airport. So I was offered a position as a patrol captain with the Sherwood Police Department, which is a bedroom community just outside the city of Portland. I worked there for 8 years and supervised really the entire department. I was the patrol commander for 6 years, and then I was the services commander for 2 years. Did everything from canine to motors to patrol to schools, detectives, records, property evidence, all kinds of stuff. And then I really wanted to be a chief, and I did get my master's degree and started applying around. I decided, I might like to stay closer to home because I live in the central Willamette Valley. And so an opportunity came in Mount Angel, and so I grabbed it, and I have been the chief of police here for almost 8 years.
I feel like a slacker listening to that. That's incredible. It's really interesting to me because almost every person in leadership that I talk to is so driven,
Mm.
between the various assignments, going to school, there's always this next level that you're trying to get to, and it's admirable, and it really does make me feel like I need to step up my game a little bit. Um, I was curious in hearing you talk, all the various assignments you had, all of the years of experience that you've had in this profession, are there any lessons that you've learned that have been really instrumental in your life or that could help someone throughout their career or help them to promote and get to a point of leadership? Is there anything that you learned?
Well, it's really interesting, and of course, having been in the profession now for as long as I have, I've seen an awful lot of people come and go. I've seen a lot of people be successful. I've seen quite a number of people fail. And you know, I suppose the biggest thing that I learned early on, I'm very much a self-made man. I haven't been relying on other people. I've gone my own way. I'm not uh, the fair-haired guy. I've never been under those circumstances. So I like to sometimes say that I've fought everything to get where I'm at.
Yeah.
But I've learned an awful lot. And as I have matured, and I truly believe it is maturity, I've learned to listen. I've learned to be, and you and I were talking about this a little bit before we started the podcast today, about being present,
Mm.
and I wish that um, some of the conversations, some of the learning that I've been through, and of course, we all go through different phases in life when we're supposed to go through them. But I wish, certainly looking back, like we all do, that I would have had some of the information that I have now, way back then, especially being, mindful, being present, and um, gosh, just truly being more mature. A more mature individual. And I know that you and I are going to talk a little bit about some of my challenges along the way. And I think a lot of that has to do with maturity. I think
Yeah.
some of it has to do with stubbornness. And but I will say a big part of um, what's made me the individual, the man that I am today, has been as a result of just being willing to learn, willing to try new things, willing to step really outside of myself,
Mhm.
and to grow. And those lessons have been hard at times, but I think have made me a much more resilient person, and have made me, I think, a much happier person in the end.
Yeah, I think in order for us to evolve, we have to understand the opposite of what we're looking for. And I mean that in the context of, you talk about being present. And that's something I've been really trying to focus on in my life because it's nervous system regulation. As mindful and as present as you can be, the less stress, the more regulated your nervous system is going to be, and the more of that baseline you're going to find.
Mhm.
And I was having this thought process recently because I come from a childhood where we were super present always, like we didn't have social media, we didn't have
Mhm.
phones, like, we're riding bikes and getting dirty and, there was no numbing or escaping in my earlier life. And I have found that I've fallen into, as I've gotten older, this, modern day habit of escaping, numbing, being on my phone too much, not paying attention, ruminating about things. And so it's almost like I understand what it was like to live in a space of presence and being mindful and how awesome that was and how great I felt mentally. And now I know the reverse to that and how foggy you feel and how stressed, and so trying to find the opposite of that. And I do think that you kind of have to experience two sides of the coin in order to understand what it is that you want to do for yourself in your life.
Mm.
I'm really curious, and we didn't talk about this at all offline, but you said that you were a self-made man and that you were really driven. And I can relate to that as well. And I have my reasons for being that way, but I'm curious, what gave you that fight?
Mm. I have a very deep rooted feeling for fairness. I have a very deep feeling for parity. I guess maybe that's why I'm a law enforcement officer. I believe in justice, and that doesn't always happen, you know. There's a lot of people for whatever reasons, that get put in positions where they rise to certain levels, or they get opportunities in special assignments, or they do a variety of different things, and it's almost like middle school at some level. Who's your buddy, and what are you going to get if I'm your friend, or vice versa. And so because of that, and because I think um, there is and has been a tendency out there to be disparate in the treatment of one another,
Mm.
that I felt that there's something better, there's something to learn, there's something that I want to do, and the only way to get there is to put myself in places and positions, and literally at times fight to go into a certain position, or have an opportunity that I wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah.
And so I wish I knew exactly what the root cause of my drive is, but you can ask anybody. Yes, I'm quite driven, and I am very proud of the things that I have done, and the stuff that I'm continuing to do today. I mean, people think I'm crazy anyway, because we talked about my law enforcement life, but we haven't talked about what happens when I put the gun in the safe. So I'm very driven on that side as well, and I'm involved in all kinds of crazy stuff on that side. So anyway.
This man never naps. I can tell you're not a napper. No, I really
Not.
appreciate that. And, I do think that things come with maturity. When I was younger, I think my drive was very much so to prove everyone else wrong. I had so many naysayers in my life that told me that I would never amount to anything. And so I had this drive to like fight to like stand up and give the middle fingers to all the people who had doubted me in my life. And then as I got older, that drive became less about me and more about helping others. And so I think that does come with maturity. In the beginning, it's like I just want to prove everyone wrong. And then when you get older, you're like, I don't really care about proving anyone wrong anymore because I don't care what people think anymore. But I do, have this deep-seated drive to help people. I did want to talk a little bit about you, and I know you mentioned it earlier, that you had some challenges in your career, and one of the things that we talked about was, your efforts in getting into the FBI Academy. Can you explain what that process looked like and maybe some of the challenges that you experienced?
Sure. Well, when I went to work for the airport police, that was really my first exposure. I'd seen other leaders that I'd had, other supervisors with the yellow bricks, and talking a little bit about their experience at the FBI Academy. particularly when I was a sergeant and talking with some lieutenants back then. So I was interested, and but it wasn't until I went to work at the airport and I started working with somebody who'd actually attended the FBI National Academy in Quantico, that really kind of sparked me, and I went, yeah, I got to go to that
Yeah.
because and as advertised, it is the top 1% of world law enforcement that attends the FBI Academy. They only run 4 sessions a year. There's about 220, 250 people per session. And my session that I was blessed to be able to attend was, I think we had 46 states were represented and 17 foreign countries. So that was quite an honor to be able to go. But it was quite a challenge. So I mentioned the fact that I'm very stubborn and very strong willed individual. So, and it goes all the way back to when I was a kid. So I've always been the fat kid. I've always been the fat guy. I really didn't care what other people thought to a degree. I was just going to live my life. I was going to eat what I wanted to eat. I was going to exercise how I chose to exercise or not. I was going to live my life. And so not all the time was I the best example. And could I have done better? Certainly. The first real slap in the face for me, first wake up call, and it wasn't a great wake up call because it didn't matter at that particular moment. I had applied to attend the FBI Academy, and of course, you apply through your state FBI office, and then they go through a process, and the person who's in charge of training then makes the recommendation and whether or not you get to go or not. So, and right over my right shoulder is my graduation certificate from the NA and my yellow brick and my blue brick and everything else. But also there is an envelope, and inside that envelope are two letters I received from the FBI that really say, and I'll be very frank, hey dude, you're too fat to go. You're not going to be able to go. So your application's been denied. And so I took that the first time, and I'm like, wow, really? I mean, because I've seen other people go, and I've seen people come and go, and I go, wow, that just doesn't seem very fair to me.
Mm.
Well, I'll maybe try some other stuff. Maybe it's not as important to go. So I went through some other training, and that was cool and all. But it really wasn't that deal that I really wanted to go to and have that experience. So I applied again, and I got another letter that said, "Dude, you're too fat. You can't go because anybody from Oregon has to fit this certain mold, and you do not fit the mold. So since you're not fitting into the box, you don't get to go."
Mhm.
And so yeah, that kind of made me angry, and I thought about that for a really really long time. And I guess one day I was sitting around and probably in a very glass-filled place, and I was looking at myself and my image and thinking, you're kind of a bullheaded son of a gun, and you're you could do better. And yeah, so let's figure this out. And so I did. Um, I changed everything about everything that I was doing and got into better nutrition, got into some exercise. Um, I lost 135 pounds. And it was really funny because I was a part of a leadership training group and an FBI agent, in fact, the FBI agent who was in charge of sending people to the NA from Oregon was a member of that same group. So she and I were talking all the time about the fact that I wanted to go to the NA. And it was really kind of funny because we got together. We were having meetings, I think monthly or quarterly, and so got together and we had a meeting, and she knew me one way, and then I think she saw me about 3 months later, and we got into this conversation, and she says, you're going. And so I jumped in the process and got all the approvals and got my body fat test, and I was, my BMI or whatever was really low. And then I got to go. And not only did I get to go, but I got to go twice because I went in 2013. I was there for a week, and then the government shut down, and then they sent us home. And then I got to go again in 2014 and finish what we started. So yeah, I got to go.
What a
But
great story. That's a great story. There's there's a saying that I like to live by, and I'm stealing it from someone somewhere, I don't know. But it said, when the why is strong enough, the how becomes easier. And so that's what I heard in your story is like you had this why, like you wanted to go. And so you were able to figure out the how because your why was strong enough to get you there. And so
that's
I thought that's a great story.
that's absolutely true. And it's I've had to re-examine that a number of times actually since then, because it's gosh, it's been 11 years since I went to the NA. And there's other things that I want to do, even um, everything kind of slips and slides and all that. And of course, I haven't gained back all the weight that I had previous to going there, and I feel really good about that. But just to be able to stay active and those types of things, I have to work really hard to find those whys.
Mm, yeah.
And it's really hard.
I think it's hard for everybody. And I think that your why changes throughout your life, and I think you also have to your point earlier of being like adaptable and, a learner is trying to understand like what is the why right now, and how can I get there? And ultimately, like we're all going to have goals. That's the idea, hopefully, is that everyone has goals within their life. And then it's like, what is that why? Is it strong enough to figure out the how? And I think I've had plenty of times in my life where maybe not. Like maybe I don't want it bad enough that I don't take action. But then you have to, like you said, search really hard to find that burning why that does matter to you enough.
Exactly.
How do you think that that experience changed the way that you lead? Do you think that it taught you lessons on how you can be a better leader?
Yeah, it taught me a lot of different things, and I've been married for 36 years to the same person. I have a daughter who's 34, has a successful career. I, I've learned a lot, and going through that process, taught me that it's 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 much more than just life is much more than just being stubborn and going a direction that you think you need to go down for yourself. I was exposed to so many people doing the same type of work that I was doing, and going to the NA. And I know that there's a lot of other programs and a lot of other training out there, but having that opportunity to really connect with those other leaders affirmed a lot of things for me, that we're all doing the same type of work. We all experience a lot of the similar kind of things, but um, it affirmed the fact that, the direction that I was headed, the fact that, I was seeking to be a better person. I was seeking to be a better leader. I was seeking knowledge
Mm.
because as I progressed in my career, and I really I kind of focus on the last 15 years. That my office door really, except for right now, is always open, um, it, and I truly want people to breach that doorway and actually come inside to have conversations and to be present with them and to share, not in that great dad or parental way of sharing, but to have those experiential conversations um, that nobody ever had with me. And I guess that kind of goes back to that self-made guy who had to fight for everything because nobody took the time to explain a lot of things to me, why we do the things that we do, why it's important. You know, Paige, if I had something much more than those little commercials on Saturday morning, that or those little I forget what they were called, but there was the little kind of a cartoon thing about a bill or nutrition or a variety of different things, and of course we had the food pyramid and that kind of stuff, but nobody really talked about, and we're all different. We all have a different learning style, right?
Yeah.
And so that recognition came very late, I think, in life for me. The fact that we can recognize the fact that everybody does have a different way of learning, and we receive and process information differently. But I think even backing it back to when I was a kid, if I'd have had a better why, and not only a better why, but truly an explanation and maybe somebody who had a conversation, maybe I wouldn't have gone through what I've had to go through, and I'd have been more successful sooner. I wouldn't have been as bullheaded, wouldn't have cared as less as I did. But then again, that didn't make me, having gone through all that, made me into the person that I am today and made me a better leader, made me a better learner, made me a better listener.
Yeah.
Um, and that's some of the things that I just absolutely love to do. And take the time to explain why we do the things that we do. And it goes much even deeper than just the interaction between myself and my staff, but with the community and with the citizens that we deal with. When I was a sergeant with Salem, one of the things that I realized was, if I just sat back and listened to people, especially when they were so upset at the work that my officers were doing, if I just listened and took in some information, and then when they were ready to receive it, then give them some information, my gosh, the complaint rate went through the floor. People stopped complaining about the officers when they were so upset. And the officers didn't have to go through the IA process because we entered into a conversation where we didn't necessarily have to agree on everything, but nobody had ever taken the time to explain and really delve into the why just a little bit more, kind of back to what we were talking about.
Yeah, and I completely agree that all of our past experiences prepare us for the person and the task that we have today. I know that when you entered into your existing agency at Mount Angel, you really had a passion for creating a culture of
Mhm.
wellness and kind of rebranding the PD. Can you explain what that looked like?
Yeah, sure. I came into an agency that was, you know, I guess I'll set it up by saying a couple things. One, we're a very small department. This is a small community. There's about 3,400 residents here, 3,500 residents year round. We have this ginormous Oktoberfest thing that happens here every year, where somewhere between four and 500,000 people come to our city
Wow.
over the course of 4 days. But normally, our police department is seven sworn if I'm fully staffed. And that includes myself, a deputy chief, an acting and capacity sergeant, and four officers. Um, and so we've been the same size for years and years and years. Um, it's been interesting because we are a small city. We're kind of off the I-5 area and we're out in the country. And it's hard to get people to want to come to work here because traditionally they have paid a very low salary. The community does fairly well, but it's not an affluent community in comparison to like Lake Oswego or Sherwood or someplace like that. And so they used to have officers sign a 3-year contract to come to work here. And they would verbally, I mean, the mentality when I started working here was people were doing time. I had one officer who said, "Yep, I've got a year and a half left." oh, a year and a half left until what? Until my contract is up and then I'm out of here. It's like, okay. So the only way that they could get people to be here was to have them sign contracts, stay here for 3 years, and then threaten them that they would sue them or whatever for training dollars that the agency would have spent on them, giving them their certification in law enforcement.
Mhm.
Anyway, that's a really, really backwards way of looking at building people in their career, valuing them and all that. So I had a number of people working here that were virtually doing time. And one of the first things that happened when I came to work here is those contracts aren't legal any longer in Oregon and haven't been for a long time.
Mm.
Consulted with our legal folks. I ripped up those contracts, and certainly when I did that, then there were a few people that flew out of here as fast as they could, and then I've been basically rebuilding and rebranding the department since then. And with that, when people are here forcibly, or you're keeping them here forcibly, they don't have any buy-in into the community. They don't have any buy-in in the organization.
Mm.
And if they don't have buy-in into the organization and the community is not going to have any buy-in into them either.
Mhm.
And so there wasn't a lot of recognition or care or, you know, yeah, I'll just go back to saying there wasn't a lot of care for the police department, and the police department really didn't care for the community.
Mm.
They were just kind of, everybody was going through the paces, and that reputation made it beyond the city. The reputation of the agency and the community was not very positive. And I knew that coming in, and it needed to be changed. And so I began the very painful process of rebranding and changing the culture of the police department, really one person at a time.
Mm.
And, of course, I'd been through this type of, I'll call it training, when I went through my master's program. I have a master's degree in organizational leadership. And so we talked about rebranding, we talked about culture, we talked about communication, talked about all these different things. And so really I was getting set up for this opportunity. And it took a number of years for us to get to the point where we are a highly respected agency. We happen to be in union negotiations right now. I happen to believe that we have a very attractive offer for anybody who wants to come to work here in the future. And it's a great place to work. We have low crime. The community loves us. They wave at us with all five fingers. They love to have us around. They support us during National Night Out and drug takebacks and different things like that. And yes, we get the obligatory plates of chocolate chip cookies and uh, joking donuts and things like that every now and again. So, but we're in a much better place today than certainly we were 8 years ago when I started.
That's awesome. So your strategy was to come in, have an open door policy, one person at a time, start to talk to them, figure out, where they're at and what you can do to shift the culture into a place where people actually want to be there long term. They don't feel like they're um, contractually obligated to be there for a certain amount of time or else. And now it's a place that is thriving.
Yeah, and a big key to that is value. So making sure that the individual that is working here feels valued. And of course, going even further than that, making sure that the organization has a valid mission statement, that we actually have a vision, and that our values are steadfast, and that everybody in the organization can ascribe to all those, including the law enforcement code of ethics. And then we can work together as a team to move forward to attempt to achieve our vision by, a very mission-driven way of doing things, but staying true to our values.
Yeah. Are you willing to share what your mission and your values are now that you've rebranded?
Well, it's interesting, and I'm gonna move off camera just a little bit.
Okay.
So, um, not that it can't be, memorized or anything like that. I've brought, something that I picked up certainly at the FBI Academy, but it's kind of one of those law enforcement culture things. Most agencies have challenge coins, something that officers can be recognized for, when they do good work, say something right, just for being who they are, and didn't want to make our values too many because there's certainly some agencies that have really long lists, and then NYPD that's got, three words that they put on the side of their cars. Ours are pretty simple: professionalism, courage, respect, compassion, and integrity. And when I sat down with the department and tried to, reaffirm or come up with that set of values, it was uh, it was awful tempting to try and lead them in a direction so that we could do it with an acronym. Um, but uh,
You guys
but
love
those
acronyms.
what's that?
Said you guys love your acronyms.
Yeah, we do love our acronyms, but I thought the individual words, when we started talking about it and started boiling down what each one of those words mean, was more important than trying to figure out some
Sure,
cute acronym that might help us remember.
sure.
And really, these values are intrinsic, with, I think, most all law enforcement officers. There's not anybody that doesn't want to be professional. There's not anybody that wants to be perceived as not having courage. Um, we all, I think, get into this job because of some form or fashion of respect. Um, if you're doing your job and you're doing it well, you're using compassion every day in how you're, interacting with people, and how they're interacting with you. And last but not least, integrity. It's the only thing that can't be taken away from you.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to give that up. And our mission is on the website, but I'll just boil it down to this. We are driven to be a destination agency, to be an agency of value, and to provide excellent law enforcement services for this community, and to do it in a professional, compassionate, meaningful way. And that's what we do every day. And it's really cool to see the community respond the way that they do. I really focused on a lot of different things, but we focused at the lowest common denominator. Oftentimes, it's not very sexy. Doing like code compliance work, it's the broken window theory. You let the broken windows be broken and don't fix them, and then there'll be more broken windows. But if you start going after those issues as they arise, chances are there'll be less of them. And yeah, we built a lot of trust just by going out and doing code enforcement and having those conversations, and it's been great.
Yeah. I was having a conversation recently about this idea of change and how I think intrinsically we're all a little bit fearful of the unknown of change. And there's a lot of resistance to this idea of like we need to change the culture of policing. And I'm always a little cautious of my wording when I say this because there are so many amazing things, in the policing culture. And some of those things that you explained today, this team mentality, this idea of honor and integrity and courage and respect, like those are all things that should be cherished and uplifted. And I think that if everyone recognizes that those are the things that make this profession so great, it's maybe that we're trying to add more of a culture of wellness. We're trying to give more to what is already great within the culture. And so I know you are, the immediate past president as of like a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
of the Oregon Chief of Police Association, and you're fighting for a wellness program for every cop in the state. And I really would love to understand what that looks like to you and maybe some of the challenges that you've seen, because we know that you're a smaller organization. And in my conversations with smaller agencies, it's maybe a little bit more challenging. And we know that every single person matters and every single person deserves to have resources that they need to thrive. So, what did that fight for getting that wellness program look like for you?
Yeah, that's, it's really tough. And wellness, of course, as I'll say taken center stage, right?
Yeah.
That's I think the cornerstone of your business, and we hear this all the time. It's probably the buzzword of law enforcement buzzwords right now. But it's tough. I've sat back and I've been with different agencies that have had, peer support or support officers and things like that for years. Um, and I've seen the programs, really good programs. I've seen really, really bad programs. Um, and it's tough. There's agencies that jumped on the bandwagon right out of the gate. But they're larger agencies and they won awards for doing things like yoga and for exercise and being able to give their officers an hour off a day to be mindful and to be present
Mm,
and to work on mindfulness and those types of things. And like I said, there's some great agencies in the state that have won some amazing awards and have done an amazing job. Um, but it's kind of come back to me and my agency. There's, like I said, there's seven people, seven sworn officers. I have one non-sworn, so I'm going to say and then I've got two reserves. So there's basically nine people that I'm quite concerned with, myself included. Um, and how do I, as a leader, take care of my people? Because really, that's what it's about. It's about them. It's not about me. But how can I provide a positive, healthy workplace? And um, my little police station is tucked into an old fire station where two fire trucks used to park.
mm,
And there's no extra room. In fact, our evidence room is very small. There's no place to set out a yoga mat. There's no place to do those kinds of things. And I've attended conferences and I've been through some of those yoga sessions and things like that. And I think that's all great, and but how do I, as an agency this small, do that? And of course, people keep telling me, well, you need to partner with larger agencies, create a some type of a cohesive partnership where you can get all this stuff done. Well, that's pretty tough. Especially, our closest partner is about 4.5 miles away. Not that we don't love them or want to help them, but it seems like we're in direct competition with them all the time. And I don't want to be in competition with somebody, especially when it has to do with wellness.
mm,
And so it's really hard to develop those partnerships um, for this. And finding the time to be able to do it, finding the resources, finding the providers, even finding the room to be able to do it. So what I have started, and it isn't me, but I was a part of starting a push with the Oregon Association of Chiefs of Police, moving forward towards wellness. You and I discussed, and it's no secret that I had a cardiac event about 6 years ago. Um, so it's really important to me because I have no desire to leave this planet anytime soon. So I have much more things to do. But how do I get that done here? And so a lot of that has to do with resources and really about money and the availability of those resources, maybe even from partners and all that. So how do we do that? And we need to start having these conversations. And one of the things we've done with OACP is we've kind of partnered with the Oregon Association or Oregon State Sheriff's Association, the Oregon State Sheriff's Association. And we have been working on getting a bill in front of the legislature about wellness and supporting wellness for first responders.
Mhm.
And in fact, one of the big pieces of this bill was named after a former sheriff here in Marion County who passed away recently due to cancer. And so it's the Jason Myers, Sheriff Jason Myers portion of the bill. And what we're trying to do is set up a grant program through the state so that there can be funds that will be available to agencies like mine, but really all agencies, to be able to pay for those providers, to pay for those resources, and to give my officers options. Because I know that there isn't one program that fits all, right? And so I would really like to give our folks the option to determine what wellness means to them and how to be successful moving forward, through exercise, through nutrition, through mindfulness, through yoga, through flexibility, through um, having the ability to talk to a mental health provider if that's what you want to do. And all that costs money. And so having those additional resources that we might not otherwise have here in a small town is a really important thing. And I've written a lot of grants and I've gotten a lot of cool stuff and even money for a lot of different things. But this is probably one of the most important things. And fortunately, I mean, we live in interesting times, and budgets are kind of declining. And even our legislature, we're almost through the large session this year, the long session. They made a decision that there wouldn't be any new grant programs after all. So it's something that we're going to have to continue to work on and continue pushing this forward. Well, the Chiefs Association has stood up a brand new committee. We've got a wellness committee. It's myself and another chief will be co-chairing this and trying to work with other chiefs and other organizations to try and make this a more robust thing. And really, it comes at us a couple different ways. Not just for my folks who are here working the job every day, but I'm also concerned with what my next chapter looks like, because I've seen a lot of folks retire and they kind of fade into oblivion because it's kind of what's happened when I've left each department that I left. You kind of fall off the face of the earth. You don't even get invited to the retirements. You don't get invited to the, different ceremonies of promotions and those types of things anymore because you're just not there. And so I'm quite concerned about our retired chiefs and even concerned about retired police officers and first responders out there. Our retired folks have been through an awful lot. And if you look at when they're ending their career, they're ending their career at a time where we're just now kind of getting revved up and understanding what wellness looks like and what you need to do to be
Yeah.
more resilient and those types of things. Well, those people who have been through an entire career of service and have seen so much and been involved in so many different things, they weren't provided all those resources and those opportunities when they left out the door to leave as a complete whole person ready to move on to the next chapter.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm pulled in a lot of different ways here, but trying to create opportunities so that agencies like mine can figure out what's most important for their individual employees, but then also making sure that when people leave this career field, that they're as healthy and as whole as they can be. And even if they're not, that there are resources available for them, whether they can afford them or not, so that they can have successful retirement after a lifetime of service.
Yeah. No, I think that our missions align so much that I am in agreement with you. I think that every first responder in the country deserves to have the resources that they need to thrive. And how can we do that? How can we get that in front of everybody? And I agree, not only do you want to prepare people for retirement, but how can you also have resources that they can utilize in retirement? because we know that that transition can be tricky. We know that health starts to decline, even more so in retirement for a number of different reasons. And so, my hope is that through all of these conversations and all of the efforts from individuals like yourself, that we'll start to see that progress in the direction of everyone feeling like they have it, not because their organization has the funding, but because they have it, they get it, and it's not exclusive to people who have money versus people who don't. So I appreciate your efforts in that space. And I know, we're kind of running out of time, but you mentioned it that, one of your deep whys is because you have experience with, health challenges and things that have happened to you due to stress and maybe didn't have the resources that you needed proactively or reactively to that. And so it kind of goes back to what we said before, if we're going to make a change, the why has to be big enough that the how becomes manageable, becomes doable. And I think that you're taking all of your whys and you're turning them into action. So I appreciate you and your efforts. And I have one final question for you, and then I'll let you kind of wrap it up if we missed anything. But one of the challenges I think that a lot of people are having is getting the younger officers to proactively prioritize their wellness before there's a mental health issue, before there's an injury, before there's a crisis. What words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career, in the context of wellness? Maybe something that you wish you would have known that would have helped you, or something that you've learned along the way.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to what I previously mentioned is take the opportunity, the new generation of officers, and I wouldn't say that they're necessarily a new generation of officers, but for the last, let's just say, oh, maybe even 20 years, 25 years, we've seen a generation of people coming in who are not afraid to ask why.
Hmm.
And I think it's really important for them to continue to ask why. Being thoughtful when you ask why,
Hmm.
and ask good why questions, but then be willing to listen and have a conversation, not just a short exchange of thoughts, but to have a conversation. And I think if people would have had much more of a conversation with me, um, in my early years of law enforcement, I wouldn't have had to have lost 135 pounds to go to the FBI Academy. I wouldn't have had the difficulties that I've had throughout the years. Wouldn't have had to fight for some of the positions that I've had. If people would have had conversations with me, and that's what drives me to do some of the things that I do. That's what's driven me to be a chief of police, is to give you the why, to share information. Not from the dad perspective, because Lord knows we're everybody's daddy all the time. But I don't want to be anybody else's dad. I want to be a person who shares information and points you in the right direction and gives you the tools that you need to be successful. And so my advice to my younger self, my advice to anybody who's coming into the career is a couple things. One, listen, ask why, be mindful, be present, care, you know. Um, and then a couple other kind of strange little things. Don't be afraid to be who you are.
Mm.
And don't be somebody that somebody else wants you to be. Maintain your identity. There's so many people that get into this career and then they change their identity completely from who they were to who they think other people want them to be. Um, we don't want robots working in this career field. We want individuals and people who are able to think through things and look at things critically. And so um, by being yourself and maintaining who you are and doing the things that you enjoy doing, and I guess maintaining that balance, right, between work and being off duty, but by being original and remaining who you are and being steadfast in that, I think is a really, really important thing.
Thank you. Great words of wisdom. I appreciate your time so much. If we missed anything, I'll give you the opportunity to wrap it up, but that's all I have for you. And I really enjoyed our conversation, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Paige.
Of course.